So many folks I talk to think growing grapes is this complicated, high-maintenance endeavor that requires years of experience and specialized equipment. And I get it. You see those perfectly manicured vineyards on television, rows and rows of vines trained along elaborate trellis systems, and it seems way out of reach for a backyard gardener. But here is the truth. Growing grapes at home can actually be one of the simplest fruit-growing projects you ever take on, if you approach it the right way. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire process from selecting your first vine to harvesting clusters of sweet homegrown grapes. And I am going to show you the easiest method I have found that minimizes your workload while maximizing your harvest. Plus, stick around to the end because I am going to share a simple trick for turning your extra grapes into something your whole family will love. Let us get into it. Grapes are one of the most rewarding plants you can add to your property. They are long-lived, often producing for 20, 30, even 50 years or more, once established. And the beautiful thing is, once you get them going, they really do not ask for much. A little pruning, some basic care, and you will be harvesting more fruit than you know what to do with. The key is setting things up right from the beginning and choosing an approach that works with your schedule, not against it. So let me start by helping you pick the right variety for your situation. Now, when it comes to choosing a grape variety, this is where a lot of people overthink things. They get caught up researching dozens of different cultivars, comparing flavor profiles, worrying about disease resistance charts. And while all of that information has its place, let me simplify this for you. The single most important factor in choosing your grape variety is matching it to your climate. Get that right, and everything else becomes so much easier. If you are gardening anywhere from USDA zones 5 through 9, you have got a ton of options. But here is what I recommend for most backyard growers who want reliable results without a lot of fuss. If you are in the cooler zones, say zones 4 through 6, look for varieties bred from American grape stock. Concord is the classic choice, and for good reason. It is incredibly cold-hardy, naturally resistant to many common grape diseases, and produces those deep purple clusters with that unmistakable grape flavor most of us grew up with. Concord can handle winter temperatures down to -15 or even -20 degrees Fahrenheit without any special protection. Another great option for colder climates is Marquette, which is a newer variety that produces excellent wine grapes if that interests you, and it is hardy down to about -30 degrees. For those of you in warmer zones, 7 through 9, you can grow those American varieties just fine, but you also have the option of European-type grapes if you want to try your hand at something different. Thompson Seedless does well in hot, dry climates. Flame Seedless is another popular choice that handles the heat. Now here is my honest advice. After growing grapes for many years, if you are just starting out, go with a variety that is known to perform well in your specific area. Talk to your local extension office or visit a nearby nursery that specializes in fruit plants. They will know exactly which varieties thrive in your region. Do not try to push the boundaries with some exotic variety that barely survives in your zone. Start with something proven, get some success under your belt, and then experiment later if you want. I have found that one healthy, well-matched grapevine will outproduce 3 struggling ones every single time. Once you have got your variety selected, the next step is finding the right spot and getting your soil ready. And this is where we really start setting ourselves up for that easy, low-maintenance growing experience I promised you. Grapes need one thing above all else, and that is sunlight. We are talking full sun here, which means at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight every single day during the growing season. More is even better. I have seen people try to tuck grapevines into partially shaded corners of their yard. And while the vines will grow, the fruit production drops off dramatically and disease problems tend to increase. So do yourself a favor and find the sunniest spot you have available. The second thing to consider is air circulation. Grapes are susceptible to fungal diseases, especially in humid climates, and good airflow around the vines helps keep the foliage dry and healthy. Avoid planting them right up against a fence or wall where air tends to stagnate. If you can position your vines where they catch a bit of a breeze, you will have far fewer problems down the road. Now let us talk about soil. Here is the good news. Grapes are actually pretty tolerant of different soil types. They do not need rich, heavily amended soil like your tomatoes or squash might. In fact, overly fertile soil can actually work against you, producing lots of leafy growth at the expense of fruit. What grapes do need is good drainage. They absolutely cannot sit in waterlogged soil, especially during the winter months. If you have heavy clay soil that holds water, you have got a couple options. You can plant on a slope where water naturally drains away, or you can build up a raised mound and plant into that. Before planting, I like to dig a hole about twice as wide as the root ball and just as deep. I mix the native soil with a bit of compost, maybe a third compost to 2/3 existing soil. Nothing fancy. If your soil drains reasonably well, that is really all the preparation you need. I have seen people go overboard amending their soil for grapes, and honestly, it is not necessary. These are tough, adaptable plants. Give them decent drainage and sunshine, and they will reward you for decades. All right, let us get this vine in the ground. Planting time depends on where you live and what form your grapevine comes in. If you are buying a bare root vine, which is typically the most affordable option, you will want to plant in late winter or early spring while the vine is still dormant. For most of the country, that means sometime between February and April, depending on your zone. The ground should be workable, meaning not frozen, but you want to get the vine in before it starts pushing out new growth. If you are buying a potted vine from a nursery, you have a bit more flexibility. You can plant those from spring right through early fall, though I would avoid the hottest part of summer if possible. The vine will establish much more easily when it is not fighting extreme heat right out of the gate. Here is how I plant my grapevines. First, I soak the roots in a bucket of water for a couple hours before planting. This is especially important for bare root vines, but even potted vines benefit from a good drink before going in the ground. While that is soaking, I dig my hole. Like I mentioned, about twice the width of the root system, and deep enough that the vine will sit at the same level it was growing before, or just slightly deeper for bare root stock. I create a small mound of soil in the center of the hole, then spread the roots out over that mound. This encourages the roots to grow outward rather than circling around themselves. Then I backfill with my soil mixture, gently firming it down as I go to eliminate air pockets. I do not pack it down hard, just firm enough to make good contact with the roots. Once the hole is filled, I give it a deep, thorough watering. I mean really soak it. I want that water to settle the soil around the roots and start the vine off right. After that initial watering, I add a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch around the base of the vine, keeping it a few inches away from the actual trunk. This helps retain moisture and keeps the roots cool, but you do not want mulch piled up against the stem where it can cause rot. One thing I should mention here. When you plant your grapevine, it is probably going to look pretty pathetic. You might just have a single stick with a few roots attached, especially if you bought bare root stock. Do not let that discourage you. What is happening underground during that first year is way more important than what you see above ground. The vine is establishing its root system, and that foundation is what will support heavy fruit production for years to come. Be patient with it. Now we need to talk about supporting your grapevine, because this is an area where a lot of people make things way more complicated than they need to be. You have probably seen those elaborate trellis systems with multiple wires strung between posts, complicated training methods, all sorts of specialized hardware. And look, if you want to go that route, there is nothing wrong with it. Commercial growers use those systems for good reasons. But for a backyard grower who just wants to enjoy some homegrown grapes without turning it into a second job, there is a much simpler approach. The easiest support system I have found for home grape growing is a single sturdy post with a few horizontal arms at the top, almost like a simplified version of the letter T. You can build this yourself in an afternoon with materials from any hardware store. Here is what I use. I start with a pressure-treated 4x4 post about 8 feet long. I sink it about 2 feet into the ground, leaving 6 feet above the surface. You can either dig a hole and pack it with gravel for drainage, or use a metal post anchor that drives into the ground. Either way works fine. At the top of the post, I attach a horizontal crosspiece, just a 2x4 about 3 feet long. This gives you a T shape. That is really all you need for 1 or 2 vines. The main trunk of the grapevine grows up the post, and the lateral branches, called cordons, grow out along that horizontal crosspiece. The fruiting canes hang down from there, making harvest easy. Now, if you want to grow more vines, you can extend this concept into a simple 2-post trellis with wires strung between them. Set your posts about 15 to 20 feet apart, sink them 2 feet deep, and run 2 or 3 strands of 12-gauge wire between them. The bottom wire should be about 3 feet off the ground, with additional wires at 1-foot intervals above that. This setup can support 3 or 4 vines and will last for many years. By the way, if you are finding this helpful so far, take a second to subscribe so you do not miss the rest of this series. All right, let us keep going. Once your vine is planted and your support is in place, the ongoing care is really quite simple. Let me walk you through watering and feeding, because this is another area where less is often more with grapes. During that first growing season, consistent watering is important while the vine establishes its root system. I water my newly planted vines deeply once a week, giving them about 1 to 2 gallons each time. The goal is to encourage the roots to grow deep into the soil rather than staying near the surface. Shallow, frequent watering does the opposite, so resist the urge to give it a little drink every day. 1 good, deep soak per week is what you are after. After that first year, established grapevines are remarkably drought-tolerant. Their root systems can reach down 10 feet or more, tapping into moisture that other plants cannot access. In most climates with regular rainfall, you may not need to water your mature vines at all, except during extended dry spells. If you go 3 or 4 weeks without rain during the growing season, give them a deep watering. Otherwise, let them find their own water. Now here is something that surprises a lot of people. Grapes do not need much fertilizer, and too much can actually hurt your harvest. Heavy nitrogen fertilization pushes lots of leafy green growth, but the vine puts less energy into producing fruit. I fertilize my established vines once a year in early spring, just as the buds are starting to swell. I use a balanced fertilizer, something like a 10-10-10, applying about a 1/4 pound for young vines and up to 1 pound for mature, full-sized vines. I scatter it in a circle around the base of the vine, keeping it about a foot away from the trunk, and let the rain work it into the soil. That is really all there is to it for feeding. Some years I skip the fertilizer entirely if the vine is looking healthy and productive. Grapes evolved in relatively poor rocky soils around the Mediterranean, and they still carry that toughness in their genetics. Do not baby them with constant feeding. Let them work a little for their nutrients, and you will end up with better tasting fruit. All right, now we need to talk about pruning, and I know this is the part that intimidates most people. I have had so many folks tell me they would love to grow grapes, but they are afraid they will mess up the pruning and ruin the whole plant. Let me put your mind at ease. Yes, proper pruning makes a difference in your harvest, but grapes are incredibly forgiving. Even if you make mistakes, the vine will recover. You are not going to kill it by cutting the wrong branch. Here is the simple approach I use that keeps things manageable without requiring a degree in viticulture. First, understand that grapes produce fruit on new growth that emerges from one-year-old wood. That is the key concept. The canes that grew last summer will produce this year's fruit from their buds. Old wood, the thick permanent trunk and arms, does not fruit directly. It just supports the younger growth that does. With that in mind, here is my easy pruning method. I do all my pruning in late winter while the vine is still fully dormant, usually February or early March in my area. The vine should have no green growth showing yet. I start by removing any dead, damaged, or diseased wood. That is the easy part. Cut it off and get it out of there. Next, I look at the one-year-old canes, the smooth, tan-colored growth from last season. I select 4 to 6 of the healthiest, pencil-thick canes that are growing in good positions along my support structure. These are my keepers. Each of these canes, I prune back to about 8 to 12 buds. You can count the buds, those little bumps along the cane, where new growth will emerge. Cut about an inch beyond the last bud you want to keep. Everything else gets removed. And I mean everything. All those other canes, all that tangled growth. Cut it off right back to the main trunk, or cordon. I know it feels drastic the first time you do it. You might remove 80 or even 90% of the previous year's growth. That is normal and correct. Do not be timid about it. What you are left with is a clean, open structure with just a few selected canes ready to produce this year's crop. Those buds will push out new shoots in spring, and those shoots will flower and set fruit. After harvest, those shoots become next year's one-year-old wood, and the cycle continues. If all of that still sounds complicated, here is an even simpler rule of thumb. In late winter, cut everything back hard except for a few of the best canes from last year, and shorten those to about 3 feet long. You might not get a perfectly optimized harvest, but you will get plenty of grapes, and the vine will stay healthy and manageable. As you gain experience, you can refine your technique. Let us talk about some common problems you might run into and how to handle them, because knowing what to watch for will save you a lot of headaches down the road. The most common issue I see with backyard grapes is powdery mildew. You will recognize it as a white or grayish powdery coating on the leaves and sometimes on the fruit clusters themselves. This fungal disease thrives in warm, humid conditions with poor air circulation. If you catch it early, you can spray with a solution of 1 tablespoon baking soda mixed with a gallon of water and a few drops of dish soap to help it stick. Apply that every week or 2 until conditions improve. The best prevention is good airflow, which goes back to what I said earlier about site selection and keeping your vine pruned open so air can move through. Black rot is another fungal problem that shows up as brown spots on the leaves that develop tiny black dots in the center. The fruit turns brown, shrivels up, and becomes hard like little raisins, but not in a good way. Once you see it on the fruit, that cluster is done for. Remove and destroy any infected material. Do not compost it. Keeping fallen leaves and old fruit cleaned up around the base of your vine helps prevent this disease from overwintering and coming back next year. Japanese beetles can be a real nuisance in some areas. These copper and green metallic beetles will skeletonize grape leaves in a hurry if populations are high. For small infestations, hand-picking works surprisingly well. Go out in the early morning when they are sluggish, knock them into a bucket of soapy water, and dispose of them. If you have a serious problem, neem oil sprays can help reduce their numbers. Birds are another challenge once your grapes start ripening. They love them just as much as we do, and they always seem to know exactly when the fruit is ready. Bird netting draped over the vine is the most reliable solution. Just make sure to secure it well at the bottom so birds cannot sneak underneath. I usually put my netting on a couple weeks before I expect the grapes to fully ripen. Finally, watch out for poor fruit set, where your vine flowers but does not develop many actual grapes. This is often caused by cold or wet weather during bloom time, which interferes with pollination. There is not much you can do about the weather, but making sure your vine is healthy and not over-fertilized helps it push through less than ideal conditions. Some varieties are also more prone to this than others, which is another reason to choose varieties known to perform well in your climate. Now for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning. If you end up with more grapes than you can eat fresh, and with a mature vine you almost certainly will, here is one of the simplest and most delicious things you can do with them. Make your own grape juice, the real stuff, not from concentrate. Here is my method. Start with about 4 pounds of ripe grapes, stems removed. Place them in a large pot and add just enough water to barely cover the bottom, maybe half a cup. You do not need much because the grapes will release plenty of their own juice. Bring it to a simmer over medium heat and cook for about 15 to 20 minutes, stirring and mashing occasionally with a potato masher or large spoon. You want the grapes to completely break down. Once everything is soft and juicy, strain the mixture through a fine mesh strainer lined with cheesecloth. Let it drip for a few hours or overnight in the refrigerator. Do not press or squeeze it if you want clear juice, just let gravity do the work. What you end up with is pure, gorgeous grape juice. You can sweeten it to taste if you like, though good ripe grapes often need nothing added at all. This juice is incredible on its own, but you can also use it as a base for homemade jelly, mix it into smoothies, or freeze it in ice cube trays for a refreshing treat on hot days. Once you taste homemade grape juice from your own backyard, you will never look at the store-bought stuff the same way again. So that covers everything you need to know to start growing grapes the easy way. Find a sunny spot, plant a variety suited to your climate, set up a simple support, and keep the pruning basic. Do those things, and you will be enjoying homegrown grapes for decades to come. If this video helped you out, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you do not miss future videos. And if you have any questions or want to share your own grape growing experiences, drop a comment below. I love hearing from you. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.